Prince Mehmed Khan was born in 1429, at the height of Ottoman hostility and mobilization against the Byzantines. During the same period, his father Murad was suppressing rebellions in Anatolia, rebellions instigated by the Byzantines, whose aim was to ignite a new Ottoman civil war and bring down the Sultanate that had oppressed them for years. All of this fueled Prince Mehmed's animosity towards them. Furthermore, his upbringing was designed to further inflame his passions. As the younger son of Murad II, he had no chance of becoming a future sultan, so his education was not geared towards that end. Instead of focusing on military training, administration, and politics, he was allowed to study his inclinations. He studied the fundamentals of religion, jurisprudence, and history, and learned many languages from a young age, including Arabic, Serbian, Italian, and Latin. He began reading about Islamic history, which further captivated him, fueling his desire to fulfill the prophecy of conquering Constantinople and becoming the awaited prince. Meanwhile, Prince Mehmed Khan, his father, Sultan Murad, was terrified of a renewed civil war. There were numerous threats from all sides: a major crusade preparing to attack him, a Hungarian-Polish alliance that had breached his borders and was looting his cities, an Albanian rebellion led by a former Ottoman military commander, and, in addition to all this, a succession crisis threatening the throne of the Sultanate. This meant that if Murad died amidst all these threats, the Sultanate of his father and ancestors would not survive this time. Therefore, there was only one solution. He had to devote himself to the Sultanate until it emerged from this stage, and this dedication would only come about through concessions to all the threats. The biggest concession he made was abdicating the throne of Ottoman power, because this was the only way to preserve his lineage on the throne. He had to supervise the process of passing the rule to his son himself and help him build his rule. For these reasons, Murad, of his own free will and without any pressure from any side, announced in 1444 his abdication of the throne in favor of his son, Muhammad Khan, who was only 15 years old. Muhammad Khan, who would become Sultan Muhammad II, also known as Muhammad the Conqueror, Caesar of the Romans, and conqueror of Constantinople. Assigning the responsibility of ruling to Sultan Mehmed II at such a young age was a grave mistake, as it could embolden foreign powers who saw in the young sultan an opportunity to attack the Ottomans. Indeed, in September 1444, the Hungarians and Poles broke their agreement with the Ottomans and prepared a crusade against Ottoman lands. As news of the approaching Crusader forces spread, some Balkan Christians answered the call and rebelled against the Ottoman governors. The young sultan was unsure how to handle these rebellions or deal with the Crusader advance within his own territory. Mehmed II found himself in a difficult and unenviable position. This prompted him to send a message to his father, who was unaware of the situation, writing, "If I am the Sultan, I order you to return and lead your army. If you are the Sultan, then return and lead your state's army, which faces a grave danger." Shortly thereafter, Sultan Murad reversed his decision and returned to command the army. However, in the Battle of Varna in 1444, the Crusaders, they triumphed over the Ottomans in several battles, forcing the Ottoman army to retreat and regroup, devising a sound plan to fight back. This led to arrogance among the Poles, who decided to launch a surprise attack on their own, without coordinating with their Hungarian allies. This resulted in heavy losses for them and the death of King Władysław III of Poland himself. Consequently, they retreated and withdrew from Ottoman territory, leading to Sultan Murad's victory, his return to retirement, and the reascension of Sultan Mehmed II to the throne. Mehmed II's primary objective was to regain the trust of the Ottoman princes and commanders as their sultan and ruler. He decided to besiege Constantinople, a move that met with strong opposition from the princes and the Janissaries, who were essentially special forces whose loyalty was supposed to be to the Sultan and his protection. Their loyalty, however, was to his father, the true Sultan, not to him. This led to a coup within the capital and the palace, which ultimately forced Sultan Murad to return to power and save his kingdom. With his return, things calmed down, and the princes and Janissaries regained their allegiance to Sultan Murad. In 1451, Sultan Murad II died from an injury sustained in a battle against the Albanians. His death was celebrated throughout Europe, but what the Europeans did not know was that Sultan Murad would be succeeded by someone no less intelligent than him, namely Sultan Mehmed II, who was 22 years old at the time, understanding, wise, and had experiences he had acquired, unlike Mehmed, who was 15 years old. Upon his return to power, his first decision was to besiege Constantinople again, but this time without objections. Because during these years, Murad had deliberately involved his son in the wars, so that the princes and commanders would get used to him and his orders and avoid a rebellion like the one that happened the first time. Constantinople was one of the most important capitals in the world at the time, if not the most important. Its age exceeded 2,000 years. Named after Emperor Constantine, it was the capital of the ancient Roman Empire. Situated on a peninsula in a strategic location, it had only one land entrance, the western one, fortified by the Theodoric walls. These walls began with a moat approximately 20 meters wide and 10 meters deep. Behind this moat were 96 stone towers. The soldiers stationed there were tasked with using the Byzantine secret weapon, Greek fire, the secret of which remains a mystery to this day. The important thing is that it was an inextinguishable fire. Behind these towers was a massive inner wall designed to withstand catapult bombardment, measuring 11 meters long and 6 meters thick. In addition, there were walls along the city's coast to prevent any naval attacks. All of this made it a formidable and impregnable capital city, or so it seemed. Now, let's return to Mehmed II and his siege, which began at the Bosphorus Strait. He built 2 fortresses on either side of the strait to block any supplies for the city and prevented any ship from entering or leaving the city. Thus, the solutions of the Byzantines ended without support from Europe, and they knew that they were alone in facing the Ottomans, with a number of only 30,000 warriors in the face of the Ottoman flood, with 120,000 fighters on land and 120 ships at sea, and a secret Ottoman weapon, a weapon that would change the concept of wars forever. This weapon is the ballista cannon, with a barrel length that exceeds 8 meters and a muzzle diameter that exceeds 76 centimeters. It can fire a projectile that can reach half a ton in weight to a distance of up to 1,500 meters. All of this was on the side of the engineer Urban. It is worth mentioning that Urban offered his services to the Byzantines before all this siege. but his offer was met with rejection due to their lack of resources, and he resorted to the second option, which is the Ottomans, who provided him with all the resources by order of Sultan Muhammad II, after a promise from Urban to destroy all the fortifications of the city. The first wave of artillery bombardment began on April 6, 1453, against the walls of Constantinople. The bombardment came from all directions and lasted for 5 consecutive days. This was done without the ballista cannons, due to their immense weight, which required considerable time and effort to transport. These 5 days could be considered a mere warm-up. When the ballista cannons arrived, they began their relentless bombardment with massive projectiles. The sound of the shelling alone instilled terror in the Byzantines for 6 consecutive days. Finally, on April 8th, they succeeded in breaching the walls at the gate of St. Romanus, allowing the Ottoman forces to immediately advance and exploit this opportunity. However, this attack was a resounding failure because, as I mentioned, the city was not just walls. It also had a moat, fire, and towers. At the same time as the Ottoman attack, orders were issued to the naval commander, Süleyman Oglu, to launch an attack on the Golden Horn simultaneously with the land assault, as a way to exert pressure on all fronts. And indeed, the attack began. He carried out the orders, but was met with a strange surprise. The Byzantines had literally blocked the bay with enormous chains. Every time an Ottoman ship attempted to cross, the chains stood in its way. This caused the Ottoman ships to make a terrible mistake, crowding them in front of the chains and making them easy targets for the Byzantines. This forced the Ottomans to withdraw, losing some of their ships in this reckless attack. At that moment, Sultan Mehmed, standing on the bank, watched his naval forces being defeated by the chains and was furious. He immediately dismissed the commander of the fleet. At that moment, Sultan Mehmed was torn between 2 conflicting desires. Amidst his hesitation, a message arrived from the Byzantine emperor, offering peace and promising to fulfill all of the Sultan's wishes in exchange for a ceasefire. However, the Sultan refused, as he wanted to win this war to regain the trust of his followers, who had accomplished nothing during his reign. The conquest of Constantinople was his last chance to win them back, and he had devised a crazy plan that would change everything. The course of the war was exactly as described. The objective was to reach the Golden Horn with the fleet. Since the mission was nearly impossible at sea, the plan was to try it on land. The Ottoman ships at that time had the disadvantage of being small and short, but this weakness would now prove to be an advantage in the Sultan's plan. The Sultan ordered the preparation of a land passage with oiled wooden planks. Under cover of darkness, to provide concealment and to mask the sounds of construction, the cannons began firing. On the morning of April 22nd, the Byzantines were taken completely by surprise. They awoke to a shocking sight. The Ottoman ships were already inside the Golden Horn. By the time they could comprehend what had happened, the number of Ottoman ships had reached 60. The Sultan ordered the construction of floating bridges without foundations, using huge wooden planks secured with ropes and barrels. This allowed for the rapid movement of the troops, making them less vulnerable to attack. Light cannons were then used to target the Byzantines entrenched atop the walls and to breach the horn's defences. This is precisely what happened. Many soldiers were targeted, which prompted the Byzantines to reinforce this front with troops. The south, which left it less protected, and the cannons of the Ottoman ships began bombarding the southern walls. This led the Byzantines to commit their biggest mistake of the war, sending reinforcements to the south through the main western walls. This was exactly what the Ottomans wanted, so they could concentrate their cannon fire on the weakest areas, most importantly, the St. Romanus Gate. After ensuring the gates were weakened, they began filling in the moat, even if only slightly, to facilitate the army's passage and avoid Byzantine arrows. Then came the turn of the cavalry infantry, whose mission was to eliminate the Greek fire troops, making it easier to secure the wooden ladders on the walls. Here began the attack of the Janissary soldiers, who, as we said, were like special forces, whose mission was to breach the gaps in the walls, secure them, and protect them. This plan was an unparalleled success. The weak areas of the walls on which the attack was concentrated began to collapse. The Byzantine soldiers abandoned their positions. For the first time in history, Muslim soldiers were inside Constantinople. These soldiers raised an Ottoman flag on the gate of Romanos, which Sultan Muhammad deliberately focused on, as a sign of a secure gap. And indeed, the Ottomans entered into a final attack, so much so that Emperor Constantine XI himself refused to leave and insisted on confronting his soldiers to the death, and he died amidst the massive Ottoman attack, and all the walls and all sides fell, so that the morning of May 29th, 1453, was the morning of victory for the Ottoman army, and its control over the city, the capital Constantinople, and the Byzantine state fell into the hands of the Ottomans, and Sultan Muhammad II declared that it would be the capital of the Ottoman state. And here, Sultan Muhammad II became Muhammad the Conqueror,